Oh, how the time has flown by. It is time for another Janky review. Aptly named because I'm poor and I'm not a real critic. I'm your Janky host, Mr. James Donahoe, and today we will be doing the highly controversial Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice. Right off the bat, I want to say that this movie seems to be very polarizing. People either love it or they hate it, and there's not some spectrum in between. You either love it with a fiery, very protective passion, like I do, or you hate it with a disdain reserved only for, like, Pauly Shore movies. This review took me a very long time to do because I wanted to be very thorough with it, make sure I caught everything, make sure that I went over everything. You get the point. You guys by now know how I do these things. As always, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the movie down, I'm going to tell you what this meant, what I think this meant, things that I saw, things that I liked, things that I didn't like. We'll address a few things that the audience seemed to nitpick on quite a bit. And maybe we can turn this turkey into a beautiful swan. Or I could be making it worse, I don't know. Anyway, all that being said, let's dive right in. A year and a half after the Battle of Metropolis, Batman has finally succumbed to his inner demons and has begun a quest single-handedly to end the threat of Superman once and for all. And on the other side of the spectrum, Superman believes that Batman has taken his brand of vigilante justice too far. They're both being goaded into battling each other behind the scenes by Lex Luthor, a complex plot that Lois Lane is working behind the scenes to uncover. As Superman slowly learns the truth about Batman, and Batman learns the truth about metahumans through the mysterious Wonder Woman who is trying to investigate them, the three of them realize they have a common foe and join forces at the end to take down Doomsday in an epic battle which costs Superman his life. Despite what Warner Brothers says, this movie is very much a sequel to Man of Steel. However, the difference is, whereas with Man of Steel we had the hero's journey, right now we have the public perception of said hero. That's the thematic irony of the movie, is that although we as the audience know that Superman is the savior of Earth, the people in the world of the movie do not know this yet. They're still forming an opinion of him. Public perception of all these different figures in the movie is a very important part of the plot and what they're going for. Most of Superman's feats in the movie take place within the public eye, and everybody has a different opinion of it. Which, by the way, the great thing about Neil deGrasse Tyson being in this movie is that he is also in the comic book. I actually have this issue. It's pretty cool, huh? Thought you might be interested in learning that. Superman is seen in many, many different ways. Whether it's an angel, a demon, a source of malice surrounded by praise, a source of life surrounded by death, an outcast to be ridiculed, a hero to be remembered. And through it all, we see Superman the way that he wants to be seen. He's just a regular guy, he goes to work, he has a regular job, he gets yelled at by his boss. He's just a man trying to make it through the day. And that's a very important point to remember, because even though Lex Luthor figures it out, and Lois Lane kinda has inside knowledge by accident, nobody else in the movie figures that Superman is just a regular guy who goes to a job and wakes up and eats breakfast and whatever. Even Batman doesn't figure this out. He figures that Superman is this huge destructive force that needs to be dealt with. And on the other side of the spectrum, Lex Luthor views Superman as a god, despite knowing his identity. And one thing that we know about Lex Luthor in this movie is that he hates God. He has a fervent hatred of God. And since Superman is a living embodiment of God, this is his chance to kill said God. So why doesn't Lex go after him? He's got the kryptonite, he could very well kill Superman by himself. Well, there is that one line that he has. He says, if God was all-powerful, he cannot be all-good, and if he's all-good, he cannot be all-powerful. And what this means is that Superman is good, so he's not all-powerful. And we all know that Lex Luthor is not in any way, shape, or form good. So therefore, Lex sees himself as being all-powerful. Lex sees himself as being the devil. And in a way, symbolically, that is true for the film. But that's why he wants Batman to go after Superman. He wants man to kill God. And when that doesn't happen, well, he says it himself. He says if man won't kill God, the devil will do it. Think you get the meaning now. It makes a little more sense, right? One thing this movie does is it continues the theme of displaying Superman as a savior, most prominently as Jesus Christ. They have a lot of symbolism that is dedicated to this. Whereas the first movie is dedicated to his birth, this one is more dedicated to Superman as a Jesus-like figure, giving his life to save humanity. This is more about the crucifixion, and there's a few little hints here and there to substantiate that. For instance, there's this one little bit right here, where he says, "No one stays good in this world." That implies that his faith in mankind is wavering, which is symbolic of the agony in the garden. And since the devil made Doomsday, Doomsday is the living embodiment of the sins of mankind. Therefore, when Superman kills Doomsday, he's dying for the sins of mankind. It's also important to note that he's using a spear to do it. Yes, the spear was created by Batman. Yes, logically, Batman could have easily rammed it through Doomsday himself. But you have to look at the symbolic nature of the film. Superman is slaying the demon, and a spear is a very symbolic weapon to do that with. Also, I happen to think that it somewhat resembles the Spear of Longitus. Now, the actual death scene of Superman, a lot of people have already pointed out that yes, you could see the crosses in the background, it looks like the tomb of Jesus Christ. That part I don't really need to go into too much because it's very obvious. However, one thing that people did not seem to notice is this light that's shining on him is the same light on his birth. Something to think about. Batman also has several symbolic references in the movie, mostly in his dream sequences. In the first dream sequence, which people didn't seem to take too kindly to this giant ugly bat creature, what they fail to notice is that this thing is actually a symbolic metaphor. This giant disgusting bat creature symbolizes that Batman is getting lost in the monster that he has created. I think that's a theme that we remember pretty well from the Dark Knight trilogy, especially, Batman Begins, I believe? This bat creature that he's consumed with represents his anger, his malice, his general giving up on the world, giving up on his destiny, giving up on his code. He has given up. Batman is broken. That's why the bat comes out of Martha's grave. The other dream sequence he has is meant to be more prophetic. Some of it is really just set up for the Justice League movie. There's a lot of that in this movie, and admittedly it's stuff that people won't understand until Justice League comes out. That's a flaw, I'll admit it. But at the same time, this prophetic dream, it's skewed by Batman's anger, hatred, and malice towards Superman. It's a twisted vision of what could be the future. Batman just can't see it clearly because he's looking at it through the eyes of hatred. You may also notice similarities to the desert fight in this dream sequence, which indicates that Batman sees Superman as responsible for the conflict. Once again, that goes with perception of Superman. Another theme that continues throughout this movie. We'll get back to some of those aspects a little bit later in this review. Right now, let's move on, and I want to talk about the parallel between Batman and Lex. It's something that a lot of people didn't seem to notice. At the beginning of the movie, Batman, as normally perceived by the public, is seen as a fearful specter demon of vengeance. However, it seems that he has taken a rather dark turn because even the public is afraid of him. People who don't commit crimes are afraid to go out at night. Some people aren't. Some people think that he's the Batman of old. Others, not so much.
There's a new kind of mean in him. He is angry. And he's hunting.
Whereas Lex is seen in the public eye, once again, public perception playing into the theme here, Lex is seen as a kind of philanthropist. He's seen as a saint, a do-gooder, a wonderful human being. As the film goes on, for Batman, we see these various sequences of him going through a field obstructed by wheat and grass and things like that. However, later on in the film, we notice that he's walking through a field, not in a dream sequence, and his path seems to be clear, indicating that the darkness has been lifted from his destiny. Whereas Lex Luthor through the film turns into this half-crazed maniac, his insanity is revealed to the world, and he is seen for the monster that he really is. Now, if you think that's a stretch, one thing people often forget is the painting in the film. The painting is the key to unraveling the parallel between Batman and Lex Luthor. When we first see the painting, it's right side up. Angels fighting demons. Angels are from the sky, demons are from underneath. However, at the end of the movie, we see that the painting has been flipped over. This tells you three different things. One, it symbolizes Lex Luthor's absolute hatred and fear of Superman. Two, it foreshadows the upcoming events of the Justice League movie. And three, it completes the parallel between Batman and Lex. The Saint who was seen on top, Lex Luthor, is now on the bottom where the demons were, and the demons are now seen on top. The roles of these two figures have completely switched in the public eye, and that is the parallel between Batman and Lex. They switch roles throughout the movie. The action and imagery in this movie is top-notch. It's fantastic. There is stuff in this movie that I love, especially with the action. This scene here where Superman's lugging a boat behind him, that is cool. I'm sorry, I don't think anyone had a problem with this, but in case you did, screw you. That's cool stuff. That's the kind of Superman stuff I want to see in a movie like this. The Batmobile chase is really intense. Not to mention the first meeting between Batman and Superman, also very intense. During the actual fight between them, the confrontation if you will, they both have great moments. Particularly right here. I'm sorry, but that's cool. Batman realizing that he's not hurting Superman anymore and backing off like, hey man, it's okay, right? No, it's not, because you're going through the floor. And of course, I have to mention this beyond legendary warehouse fight. This is by far the best Batman action sequence that I think we've ever received in a movie. Well, that's saying quite a bit. Maybe one of. Definitely in the top 3. But this scene is fantastic. Okay, we gotta talk about this one thug here for a second. Depending on which version you watch, this guy is either okay or very, very not okay. In the theatrical cut, he simply gets bonked on the head by a box that's apparently made of cotton candy and he's fine. In the Ultimate Edition, which is what we're using here, you see his brain splatter all over the wall. A friend of mine named Richard came up with a very, very appropriate term to describe this particular thug. We call him Schrodinger's henchman. Simply because, depending on which version you watch, he either exists in a state of being alive or dead. I feel it's quite applicable, so big shout out to Richard there. And of course, the coup de grace of the movie, the all-out battle with Doomsday at the end, where the Trinity forms, Wonder Woman is a badass among badasses, Superman does his thing, Batman does his thing, mostly running away because, I mean, let's face it, what can Batman really do against Doomsday with one shell kryptonite left? But nonetheless, that's a pretty intense scene, and Doomsday is a hell of a threat, especially towards the Earth itself. All in all, I love the action in this movie. It gets my blood pumping. Now, I could go on and on about how pretty a movie this is. I mean, everyone can agree with that. It is a very pretty and very well done movie. However, I'm going to backtrack for a second and tell you about a few of the things that I didn't particularly like about the movie.
I grew up on a farm. I know how to wrestle a pig.
Like I will openly admit, it's not perfect. It really, really isn't. I still like the movie quite a bit. These things that I didn't like don't ruin it for me. But these are my nitpicks. These are my hang-ups. These are things that I personally didn't care for about the movie. 1. Jimmy Olsen. Look, I don't mind that they put Jimmy Olsen in this movie. This character is only Jimmy Olsen in name only. He has absolutely no connection to his lovable comic book counterpart whatsoever. What I do have a problem with is that they execute this innocent man. This is the guy that Superman doesn't save and ultimately doesn't give a damn about. And his death serves absolutely no purpose other than to give Lois a little bit of brief PTSD. So, that's one hang-up of mine. Look, I know they were going for dark and gritty with this, and that's fine. I don't mind that at all. I want to feel something, but make it a little more meaningful. It can be a hard balance, I understand that, but that was one of my hang-ups. Number 2, Perry White. Don't get me wrong, I love Lawrence Fishburne, I think he's a fantastic actor, and he does a fantastic job in this movie. However, why is he so angry at Clark all the time? I mean, when he hired him, did Clark put like a tank in his chair or something? Did he play some kind of joke on him? Because, my God, he has such disdain for Clark Kent in this movie, and it's very undeserved.
Watch yourself over there in Gotham. I'll let him take your lunch money. Probably some old charity croon who's got a thing for nerds. Crime wave in Gotham. Other breaking news. Water wet. WPA ain't hiring no more. Apples don't cost a nickel. Not in here, not out there. You drop this thing.
Look, I've worked in broadcast media long enough to know that you don't just walk into the room and say, hey, you're doing sports today. No, you have designated reporters for sports. Clark is not a sports guy. He's a beat reporter. So that's not the way that works. Also, he's got an interesting idea for a story. This whole Batman thing is something that would be interesting to the people. Yet, all we get is, water, wet. You know, Perry White, if you want people to keep working for you and respect you, maybe you shouldn't be such a dick. Number 3, Lex Luthor. Now, it's not 100% Lex Luthor as my complaint. Jesse Eisenberg is a very accomplished actor. He's a very good actor. He's got great moments in this movie. He really does. There's moments where he's scary. There's moments where you hate him just as much as Superman does. And that's kind of the goal. But then he has these other moments where, well...
Excuse me? Gotham roast. Well done. Hello? Break the bad news. I don't know! I would not let them tell me!
As you can see, he does overdo it quite a bit in a few places. It's led me to start calling him Squeak Toy Luthor. And to be quite honest, I don't like it mostly because it's reminiscent of Castor Troy from Face Off. It's not a particularly fond memory for me.
Whee! What a predicament! I don't know! I would not let them tell me! Whee! You good looking! Now, if you kill me, Martha dies. And if you fly away, Martha also dies. Oh, wow. Looks like you're gonna be in here for the next 100 years!
And number 4, finally, the theatrical cut. This movie received very negative criticisms for its theatrical cut, and I think it's mostly because the studio mercilessly gutted this movie to death, so much so that the storyline became completely muddled, and at the end of it, people couldn't make sense of the damn thing. I was in the same boat. I mean, there was stuff that I liked about it, but at the same time, I was like, you know, it feels like a lot of that movie is missing. And it was. About a whole half hour. Just little tiny moments even, just like this here. And this.
Slowly. It's gonna be fun. Thank you. I'm gonna need a little room to work.
These are good little character moments, and they just cut them out because who knows why? Time purposes. Maybe they thought the audience didn't want to sit through a 3-hour movie. You know, if a movie's interesting, we'll sit through it. I was interested enough in the ultimate cut to sit through it. So, that's the end of that complaint. Let's get to some of the nitpicks that other people had a problem with. I'm just going to mention the top 4. A lot of people had a lot of other complaints, and honestly, a lot of them I don't feel are really worth mentioning. Number 1, the super logos. As we can see, the logos of the superheroes are put on the drive here underneath the footage that is captured for metahuman research or whatever. Yeah, it is a little bit of a stretch that Lex Luthor's company would have come up with their super logos, but it isn't that ridiculous. It's really just more of an identifier for the audience. You're not meant to think that much about it. I mean, it's not like he spelled out the names Flash and Aquaman and what have you. That really would have been ridiculous. I really can't even believe that this was a complaint, so maybe we can just put this one to bed. Number 2, Batman in this movie is the bad guy. This is the complaint that everybody has, and they just don't admit to. They refuse to see it. Look, I'm on board with this, okay? Batman being the bad guy is a bit of a stretch, especially when it comes between these two heroes. When you really think about it, is there any real definitive version of Batman? I mean, let's look through the history record here. We've got surreal expressionism, gritty realism,
Where were the other drugs going? I never knew. I don't know. I swear to God. Swear to me.
stylized noir, political idealism,
With these are loud and clumsy. These are the weapons of cowards.
hell, even absurdist parody. All of these are perfectly acceptable versions of Batman. So why not one that can fall to the darkness? Why not one that'll take justice to the streets in the wrong manner? Why not a Batman who is wrong? Batman has a certain fan base. They wanted the infallible ninja billionaire, instead of a story about a Batman who has flaws. Now, I'm not saying that you're wrong for wanting that. I'm just saying that loosen the expectations a little bit. This is a very different Batman from the one you were expecting, but it's still a valid Batman. Anyway, I will leave that decision to you guys. Number 3, Batman killing people. Now this one I can kinda understand. I mean, after all, Batman's never ever killed somebody in a movie before. Well, except for that one time. Ugh. Jeez, everybody in that factory is dead. Oh, wait, whoa, that guy did not land on a mattress. Oh, Joker's death is definitely on Batman. Oh, come on, with the fire? Jeez. Oh, gee, let's switch franchises here.
You finally learned to do what is necessary. I won't kill you.
Oh, thank God.
But I don't have to see you.
Oh, come on, that's not how a court would see it. Look, all jokes aside, clearly, cinematically, Batman gives no fucks. At least in this movie, they give a reason for it. He's a darker Batman. He's a broken Batman.
New rules. We're criminals now. We've always been criminals. Nothing's changed. Oh, yes, it has, sir. Everything's changed. Men fall from the sky. The gods hurl thunderbolts. Innocents die. That's how it starts. The fever, the rage, the feeling of powerlessness. It turns good men cruel.
Like I said, he's the bad guy in this movie. that's the interpretation that we're going for. At least by the end of the movie, he learns his lesson. He sees the light. That's what Superman is there for. In a way, Superman and Batman fix each other. And finally, the big complaint elephant in the room, Martha. Okay. This one takes a little bit of explaining, so just bear with me. It seems that when this moment popped up, a lot of people grossly misinterpreted it as, "What? Your mom's name is Martha too? Oh man, best buddies forever!" That is such a jaundiced account of what is really being said here, guys. Look, you gotta remember that going into the fight, Batman does not know that Superman is Clark Kent. Batman sees Superman the same way everyone else does. Sees him as a godlike being. He doesn't see him as a regular guy. He doesn't see him as human at all. Listen to some of the rhetoric that he uses.
You were never a god. You were never even a man.
Talks about men are brave. You were never a man. You were never a god. You were never even a man. The stuff that he says to him is borderline racist against aliens. Now, the only real valid complaint I have heard about the whole Martha thing is that he should have been saying, "You're letting them kill my mother." I agree with that point. After all, if I was in this situation, I wouldn't say, "You're letting them kill Lisbeth," that's my mother's name. No, I'd say, "You're letting them kill my mom." But there is a certain reason why he has to say Martha instead, and that's not to connect to Batman. He says, "You're letting them kill Martha." Batman hesitates. Reason being is because he thinks Superman is fucking with him. He thinks, this guy's trying to get into my head. This guy is using my mother's name to save his pitiful life. Now, if he had said, "You're letting them kill my mom," he would have assumed that he's talking about Alien Mom. And, probably his next line would have been, "And I'll come for her next," just, or some, okay, look, that's a bad impression, but whatever. The point is, when Lois comes along and reveals to Batman that Martha's the name of his mom, it's not the comparison to his own mom that awakens him. It's the fact that his mom was human. He was raised by people. He has a mother. He wants to save his mother, just as much as Bruce does. And this wakes him up. He realizes, oh my God, I'm on the wrong side. He throws the spear away and realizes, I will help you. I will help you save Martha. And this awakening continues, because even during the warehouse fight, he eases up on the murder a little bit, but we still have Schrodinger's henchmen here. The thing is, Batman's return to the light isn't fully realized until he sees Superman, an alien, somebody who wasn't even born on this planet, sacrifice himself to save the lives of everyone. He then realizes that Superman is the man that we should be striving to be. He realizes that he is a man, just as valid as anybody else. And he says it himself, we can be better. And he's right. We can be better. That's the importance of the Martha scene. I hope that everybody can see it the same way I do. I mean, look, if your mind is made up, I'm not going to convince you. There's no way that I could. But I'm just here to tell you what I've seen and what I think of the movie. That's my interpretation of Martha. Another thing that this movie does extremely well, it borrows a lot of imagery and concepts from the comics, particularly from The Dark Knight Returns, a very long-hailed, great Batman story. It is one of my favorites. As you can see, several of these scenes were taken straight from it. I'm going to use the animated movie for comparison because I'm lazy. But as you can see, these images are taken straight from the comic. Another really important thing here is this credit. It may not mean a lot to you guys, but Bill Finger needed his name in these credits. this is the first time that Bill Finger has been given credit for the creation of Batman. Now, as I previously mentioned, there's a lot of imagery borrowed from Dark Knight Returns, with the exception of one notable reversal. At the end of Dark Knight Returns, we have Superman over Batman's grave. In this movie, the roles are reversed. And that's not an accident either. Well, everybody, that's it. That's my janky review of Batman vs. Superman, or as I like to call it, just Batman-Superman. It's a team-up movie. That's what I like about it. That's what I'm going to continue to watch it for. Write down some comments, like, share, whatever. Tell me how full of crap I am. Tell me if you agree. Just, overall critique me. I could use some critiquing. Make sure it's constructive, though. Don't try to troll me. Well, now that I've said it, you guys are probably going to troll me anyway, so do as you will. Stay tuned next month when I'll be doing Suicide Squad. This one will be a little bit easier for me to do, because it's not really weighed down with all this symbolism and what have you. So, stay tuned till then, and remember, if you can't be fancy, be janky. See ya.